Welcome to the July 18, 2019 Town of Smyrna Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. We're going to start today, and we'll call the meeting to order and start today with the invocation by Mr. Troy Powell, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mr. Jay Michelson. If you would stand with me, please.
Lord, we thank you for this time together. We ask as we do our best to lead our town that you would direct us, lead us, give us wisdom and guidance. Thank you for those in the positions to lead our town. Guide and bless every discussion. Let us do what's best for the town of Smyrna. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Face flag, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And it looks like we don't have any citizen comments at this time. Is that correct? Okay, so we're going to move on to the approval or the correction of the minutes from the June 20 meeting. If everyone's had time to review them, do I have a motion for approval?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes.
I second that motion.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. We're going to start with old business from last month, and we're going to let Mitch tell us what's going on. Mitch?
Yeah, this particular request is two different requests in one. This is to allow a setback variance of 11 feet for a subdivision entry sign, and also to allow a height variance of 3 feet for the same subdivision entry signs. The applicant has requested 11-foot sign variance to the requested setback for a corner lot. Chapter 3, Section A4 of the sign ordinance requires a sign on the corner lot to be set back a minimum of 75 feet from the center point of the intersection of the streets. So this request would make for the setback of approximately 64 feet from the center point of the intersection to the closest point of the sign. The proposal is to place a sign on the common open space of the development at the corner of 1 Mile Lane and Nisi Drive. Applicant is also requesting a height variance on the subdivision entry signs of 3 feet. Maximum size for ground signs for the height requirement is 7 feet if they are permanently landscaped at the base. Existing ground signs have two 10-foot tall pillars on either side of each of the signs. Applicant has not applied for a sign permit, which is required for all subdivision entry signs. Additionally, the signs have been placed on private property outside of the common area and are located near a storm drain within the drainage easement. The sign west of Nisi Drive is approximately 3.4 feet off the pipe, and east of Nisi Drive is approximately 2.3 off the drainage pipe. Public Works would like a minimum of 5-foot distance between the sign and the drainage pipe if work would ever need to be done on that designated pipe. The sign 5 feet setback requirement is in place so that the ability of a driver on each intersecting street to see vehicles on the other street is not impeded. The applicant has submitted a letter informing they have observed the site distance to be at least 490 feet in each direction. The posted speed limit on 1 Mile Lane is 30 miles an hour. TDOT requires a limit of clear sight of 450 feet for a single unit vehicle at that speed. Staff findings show the sign locations may meet the required vision triangle for 30 miles an hour street as recommended by TDOT standards. Realistically, motorists may travel 40 miles an hour on 1 Mile Lane. The requirement for a clear sight line increases to 600 feet in either direction for that increased in 10 miles an hour. TDOT bases the clear sight line distance requirement on the designated speed of the road rather than the posted speed. The entrance sign to the west side of Nisi Drive is within the vision triangle if assessing the road at 40 miles an hour, and the sign to the east is close but does not appear to be within that vision triangle. While the signs are placed within a dedicated sign easement, the other sign ordinance requirements must be met as well. Chapter 9, Section F2 of the sign ordinance lists criteria that must be considered by the board when evaluating a variance request. For an action granting a variance, the board shall state the provisions being varied and shall grant the minimum variance to satisfy the relief of a hardship and shall state the specific hardship which justifies the variance. The board shall not grant a variance unless it makes findings based upon evidence as it follows. A, particular surroundings, shape, or topographic conditions of the specific property involved would result in exceptional hardship upon the owner as distinguished from a mere inconvenience. The area where the signs are located, regardless of a variance being granted, is relatively level. There is a storm pipe north of the sign placement in the drainage easement as previously stated. However, none of this affects the ability of the sign to be placed to meet the ordinance requirements. The property is common open space that will be owned by homeowners association when the development is completed. However, the northernmost portion of the ground signs are placed outside of the sign easement on private property, which does have the potential to lead to discussion of who would maintain those signs that are placed outside of the common area. B, the conditions upon which petition for the variance is based would not be applicable to other similarly situated properties. Sign ordinance requires setback of 75 feet from the corner point of an intersection to any sign on a corner lot. In this instance, the right-of-ways are fairly uniform, not creating any abnormal circumstances. C, the hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. The applicant is the developer of the subdivision. D, financial returns. Property owner has not identified financial returns as a reason for requesting the variance, though marketing the development is one of the reasons stated for needing these signs. The variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property to the intent and spirit of the ordinance. The variance may have some of the above effects, as the TDOT standards may not be met. With both ground signs potentially within the vision triangle, it poses a risk to motorists exiting the subdivision. Motorists would need to stop significantly closer to the intersection to see safe distance away before pulling onto 1 mile lane. F, the variance does not confer a special privilege to the applicant that is denied to others. Staff finds the approval of the variance may confer a special privilege on the applicant since the challenges of the lot as stated under A and B are not unique. Staff recommends denial of both requests of the setback variance and the height variance due to no particular hardship with the property that was not self-created. Staff believes these issues could have been prevented if the applicant requested a sign permit before installing the signs and submitted renderings showing placement and height of the signs. The current placement of the subdivision entrance signs poses a potential risk to motorists attempting to exit the subdivision due to the vision issues of oncoming motorists. B, questions of maintenance of the signs at which portions are located outside of the common area. And C, location issues being closer to an existing storm drain pipe and within a drainage easement. Staff would recommend these signs be removed within 30 days if board denies applicant request and proper permitting be done when installing new signs. Couple pictures. This is the picture of the signs out at the subdivision took today. Across the street from the entrance to the subdivision. Driving up to the subdivision, looking at both of the signs, and then if you are sitting at the stop sign, this would be your vision looking to the right down 1 mile lane. Took a couple pictures from sitting inside a vehicle about 14.5 feet away from the edge of the traveled way, which, as mentioned previously, this is TDOT's recommended minimum distance a stop bar be placed at from the edge of the traveled way for a safe distance. And then this is looking to the left, stopped once again 14.5 foot back from the edge of traveled way. And that is all I have for this.
All right, thank you, Mitch. A lot to look at here. Tell you what, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close the BZA meeting and discussion and open up a public hearing for anyone that would like to speak for or against the request. And if you would, when you step up, just state your name and your address for the record, please.
All right, my name is Bill Huddleston. I'm with Huddleston Steel Engineering in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Appreciate the opportunity to address the board on this issue this evening. I'm a traffic engineer. I've been a member of the Institute of Transportation Engineers for over 30 years. I have a master's from Vanderbilt in Transportation Engineering. So Tim hired us to go out and check the site distance to see if we had a problem there or not. We do not have a problem there based on the TDOT and the AASHTO requirements. We measured 490 feet in each direction of site distance from the proper location. As stated, TDOT references a single unit vehicle needs 450 feet of site distance. We exceeded that. I also want to point out, though, that for a passenger vehicle, we only need 355 feet of sight distance, and all the sight distance studies I've ever done for TDOT, that's what they look at, is the passenger vehicle distance, but we do exceed the single unit vehicle distance also. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions about that particular portion of it?
Not the distances, no.
And these, what we're looking at here on these pictures was that from these guys, or is this our own drawings that we have?
What you have in front of them was submitted by the applicant.
Okay, okay. Troy, this is a copy of that. This being here where they are. I don't have any further questions about this. Does anybody else?
I do not either.
All right, thank you. Anybody else
Thank
like
you.
to speak for or against? Hello, if you state your name and your address for the record, please.
My name's Tim McClure. I reside at 1529 McCall Court, Brentwood, Tennessee. I guess, just to try to be as honest as I know how to be here, if I had known first and foremost that I needed a permit, I'd have got a permit. I've been doing what I do for 34 years. I've got developments all over the southeast here, and I don't try to break no rules. I had went down there and went by my blueprints and approvals of the city, which states my sign easement area is reason I put the sign there. And I thought I was doing the right thing. If I needed to move back, I would have. I just didn't know that the city had some rules that I needed to play by. And let me also say that I called the city and talked to one of the employees here. I'm not trying to throw nobody under the bus, but there's a lot riding on this right here. That's over a $50,000 sign, guys. I put it in your area because I wanted to put as much and nice a product as I could out there. I could have put a $2,500 or $15,000 or $1,500 little sign that said Meadows, but I didn't. And I don't do none of my stuff that way. I try to do the best and be the best and give the best to the product of the customers that I'm developing for. But I contacted one of the people here that worked for the city, and I asked him about the signs. I said, is there anything I need to do? And he says, not that I know of. He said, pretty much the developers just do their own deal. I said, do you want me to get a footing inspection? Or he said, no. So I just went, and that's why I didn't get a permit. It is what it is. I'd have been down there and paid $500, $5,000 or whatever. It didn't monetary value. I'd have done the right thing. And if I'd have known we had an issue here, it wouldn't have been that way. I'd have moved the sign back. I'm 19 feet from the house. I could have redrawn some lines with Mr. Steele. Mr. Holson could have redrawn it and fixed it if I thought that was an issue, and I would have. We would have shortened the lot or done something. But I'm just letting you know, and I've got other future things to do in Smyrna, so I'm not here to try to break the rules and do things my way. So, thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. McClure? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak for or against?
I'm Steve Steele with Huddleston Steel Engineering, and I live at 408 Division here in Smyrna. I've been working with Tim for several years now, and I've always found him to be a man of his word. I know y'all probably don't know him. I didn't until a few years ago, but when he says he tries to do it right, I truly believe he does. In that regard, we had several requests from staff for information, which we provided. I assume that's been provided to you all. Part of it was a study by Mr. Huddleston to show that it met the AASHTO standards. Then we went out and measured and located the sign, and then provided some exhibits that hopefully help you with your deliberations. I heard a very lengthy report. First I've heard of that lengthy report a little bit earlier. I guess I wish I'd had seen or read that before the meeting, and I might be able to better address some of the things that were in it. But again, just want to reiterate that Tim's not trying to pull something. He did what he thought was correct and may have made a mistake, but we don't think there is an AASHTO traffic issue out there with that entrance sign. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have anything for or against? Okay, at this time, we will close the public hearing and reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals for discussion. I've got a few questions I'd like to ask. One is, we're talking about the AASHTO. One of the questions we have is, the town adopts certain policies and things we're currently following, and I don't think AASHTO is something that's not set up on something we're following. Is that correct?
Correct.
So part of our discussion today is we have to come up with where we are on this approval or denial based on our current adoption of codes, what we're following. So AASHTO is not something we currently adopt. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we're still on something different, older. So we can't really consider that unless it was the sole factor. There's many factors here, and we're going to have to probably talk through them, because I absolutely hear what you're saying and believe that everything you did there was to make a nice sign. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But this is one of those cases to where not having a permit on it, these things would have come up for approval before, and that puts us in a position of not wanting to put this is just my thinking here. We'll hear from everybody. There's no pleasure in denying a request, especially on something like this, except for the fact that inside what we're allowed to do, we have to follow the codes adopted by our town at this time and what we're allowed to give a variance for. And with the AASHTO thing, that's something really we haven't adopted, and we have some other concerns. The drainage easement is one. And I believe there are two separate variance requests here. So let me go ahead and hit one. The height variance, and I believe that there's 10 feet because there's a column or something that's up there, right? And, we have a 7-foot code. It's been like that for a long time. So there's no hardship for sure that I can see on that particular one on why they had to be. I think they were there because you did not know that needed to be 7. But at the same point, obviously this comes up with many people and has in the past that want approval or denial based on it, and we're staying pretty consistent on how we rule to make sure if it says 7 feet and it wasn't permitted, we're going to have to go that way. Let's deal with the height variance first and hear any discussion from the board if you have any questions about that. I can't find a way to recommend approval because there's not a hardship reason for something to be 3 foot taller. And it has nothing to do with me not wanting you to have it. It's simply that is what our code says. Anybody else got some thoughts on that?
No thoughts different than what you've stated. I mean, it is the numbers. Right.
In this case, this is where staff recommended that we deny this, and it's because we have that stated code and there's not a hardship here. So I think on this particular one, I'm going to go ahead and move that we deny the request for a height variance of 3 feet on the subdivision entrance sign. Just basically, there's no hardship proven. I see no hardship to allow that, and that's really the end of it. No hardship. Do I have a second?
A second.
All right, so we have a motion for denial and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the height variance is denied. Let's move on to the setback variance, because that's the one that's actually going to cause the structure to have to be moved. Again, my thoughts, I don't want to dominate the conversation here, but based on the staff recommendation, we have a potential risk for motorists. We have questions of maintenance of the sign in the common areas. So that's something, if we approve, we have to deal with that coming down the line at some point, because we don't know how that's going to happen between the homeowners association, who's supposed to take care of that. And on top of that, we have the issue of where it is with the existing storm drain and where the drainage easement is. So we see a bunch of potential problems. Again, there's no pleasure in saying that I don't see how we can approve this based on that, but all those factors create a problem down the road, and they do evoke some sort of a special privilege also, which has been noted here, because we have not allowed those in the past to have these things. You know, we've enforced these rules.
Within the last couple of months, for sure.
So, if there were a hardship of any kind, and one thing I want to say is that we have a lot of material. We have a lot of photos, there are a lot of measurements, and I know we have a lot of man-hours, because we try to find ways to help people that work in our town. We look for ways to find a hardship, something where we can help you say, we understand why this happened, and there is a hardship here, and we want to try to make it happen. In this case, and I want to hear from everybody, because this is a serious matter, I don't see a hardship because it's quite level ground. It could have been back, and it could be inside parameters that don't have a problem with, obviously, anything with line of sight. They don't have a problem with being on the drainage easement. And also, it's not going to have any issue with the future HOA or private property issues on who maintains it. And like I said, I take no pleasure in saying that I believe we should deny the request, but it's for those particular reasons. It opens up, unfortunate, a lot of other issues down the road. And there's no other reason other than a lack of a hardship, because it can be put back.
The only thing that I see that gives kind of a debate to that would be, and if I heard you correctly, that you contacted a staff member before this to kind of get that information, was told, we don't have that, and move forward. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And that would be the only thing that would make me, you talk about a hardship, would be, we don't know who that staff member was or anything like that to.
Well, we know, he told me the name, and it's not someone in codes or planning. It was
Gotcha.
a department that doesn't really deal with signs, actually.
Even if it was, the problem you have is that it's not a legal basis that the state gives you. The only authority you have to grant variances is granted through the state, through the enabling statutes, and a mistake of an employee is not one of those legal bases that you can.
Gotcha.
And if everybody heard what Mr. Peets just said, that is our problem at hand, is that inside what we're allowed to approve as far as a variance, it has to meet these things, and it doesn't. It's not a compassionate issue where we don't want to make it work because it's already there and it looks nice. It's not that. It's that it doesn't meet the criteria. It does not pass. If a permit were actually requested with this design, all these things would have been marked as this would not work. Is that correct? It had to be further back. It would have to be the 7 feet, which I know we already worked on that. So, with that said, I wish there were a way we could find something, but because of all these conditions that staff found, it can be moved back, and it could have been prevented with getting a permit up front and working with the codes and planning. Any thoughts from anybody?
No, Mr. Pease answered my question about with staff. You can't, even if a phone call goes in, you can't use that as an excuse, unfortunately.
Right. This is a situation that we can't create something outside of what's stated. We're allowed to approve certain things if they're found to be true. And the staff recommendations found multiple things here in which we can approve. Simply don't have the power in the board to actually do that. They don't meet the actual standard in the code. So for that reason, I believe we must deny the request. All right, with that being said, so I will move to deny the request for a setback variance of 11 feet for the subdivision entrance sign due to no particular hardship, and that the property and the problem was, it was not self-created. This is something that unfortunately could have been prevented with a permit and talking with codes and planning. Do I have a second?
I will second it.
All right, we have a motion to deny and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Move on to the next order of business. As I try to hit the bookmark at the top of my pad. All right, I believe new business is a setback variance. Is that correct, Mitch?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a setback variance for property at 1009 Montrose Drive. This is a side setback variance for a carport. The requested variance is for a 3.5 foot, a total of 4.5 feet away from the side setback line of the property. The property is zoned R3, medium density, single family residential, and is approximately 0.26 acres in size. Minimum yard requirements for an R3 zone for any detached structures is 8 feet. Existing carport is 12 foot by 26 foot in size and placed on a concrete slab located at the side of the house. Section 7.080D of the zoning ordinance details requirements for variances not involving special flood hazard areas, and they are detailed as follows. The board shall not grant a variance unless it makes findings based upon evidence presented as it follows. Particular physical, surrounding shape, topographic conditions of the specific property involved that would result in a particular hardship upon the owner as distinguished from mere inconvenience. Staff finds the lot is fairly uniform in shape and topography would not result in any particular hardship. 2, the conditions upon which the petition for a variance is based would not be applicable generally to other property within the same district. Staff finds that this lot does have 2 front setbacks, which does differentiate it from other lots within the R3 district. Variance will not authorize activities in a zone other than those permitted by the ordinance. Detached structures are allowed by right in the R3 district, but are to adhere to all of the setbacks. Alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. The carport was placed by the applicant, who was unaware of this 8-foot setback requirement for any detached accessory structures. The granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privileges denied by the ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Staff finds the variance requested would provide the applicant with special privileges that are denied by this ordinance due to lack of hardships. 7, the variance is the minimum that will make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, or structure. Staff finds the requested setback variance may be the minimum to make reasonable use of the proposed structure. Granting the variance will not be detrimental to public welfare or injurious to other property or improvements in the area. Staff finds the variance should not have any of the above effects. The proposed variance will not impair adequate supply of light and air to adjacent property, substantially increase the congestion of the public streets, increase the danger of fire, endanger the public safety, or substantially diminish or impair property value. Staff finds the requested variance should not have any of the above effects. Staff would recommend denial of this request because there are no apparent hardships present pertaining to this request. While the lot does have 2 front setbacks, it is not a reasonable justification for requesting a carport to encroach upon the side setback line. Here's a couple pictures from today out the property, looking from Montrose to the front of the property. The carport is sitting right here on top of the concrete slab. Just a closer view. And then this is from the corner of the lot, just showing it's got 2 front setbacks, and then it's got a rear property as well that it could be placed in. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. Okay, this time we will close the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we will open up for a public hearing for anyone that'd like to speak for or against. You, please state your name and your address, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Adi West, and I reside at 1009 Montrose Drive. Let me start by saying I made a mistake, but once I found out that I had made that mistake, I did everything I could to get down here and try to rectify the problem. First of all, with regard to the shed on the back lot, I've got a better picture, better than that one,
You can
because
add
that's
up to
the
us if
wrong
you'd like.
angle.
Sure. Yeah, we can take a look at it.
I cut my lawn, and what I would like for you to, thank you, sir. I would like for you to take a look at the burgundy bush as well as the tree to the left. The bark on that tree sits exactly on the property line. The property line is not in between the burgundy bush and the tree. The tree actually sits on the property line. When the developers developed this area, I was one of the first in the neighborhood in Phase 2, and I talked to them as they were working. They said they did not want to cut down any more trees, so that tree has been existing there on the property line since day one. That bush I planted as a visual marker, so when I run my lawn tractor down through there, all of that property between the tree and the bush, straight to the back corner, is all my property, all of it. So that shed is 8 feet off that property line right now. If I need to move it a half inch, I'll move it a half inch. If other than that, I have nothing else to say about that other than I'll need a permit for that edifice. Moving on to the carport. As I previously stated, I've been living there since the subdivision since its conception. It was called Phase 2 at that time. In Phase 2, there is no homeowners association. As a result, others have moved in afterwards. Recently, there's been new development in that area. At this time, I would like to show you pictures of what is now called the Villages at Seven Oaks. These are the first 3 homes that are newly built within the last year and a half. I would say the last year, freshly built homes. The space between those newly developed homes is lesser than the structure I've erected to my neighbor's home. It poses no threat to my family. It poses no threat to my neighbor. And more importantly, it would pose no threat to a first responder in the event of a dire emergency such as a fire. In other words, the structure is safe. That still brings up the issue of the fact that I'm in violation of the law, and I understand that. And to that, I take, full guilt for that. And the reason for it is, I won't say incorrect information, but incomplete information. Humor me, if you will. I don't do drugs and alcohol, so I'm going to give this to you straight. It kind of went like this. I'm reenacting the conversation. I come out of my house, I say, "Hey, Jimbo," that was my neighbor at the time. "Jimbo, I like your carport." And his response was, "Well, if you get one, just make sure it's detached from your house." I'm like, okay. Now look, I'm late for work. I'll talk to you later. Detached from the house. Guys, I had no idea that the information he was giving me came from Smyrna codes. It never dawned on me. Jimbo was ex-military, served in the Seabees. He was rough around the edges, you know what I mean? He was just but a good old guy to have in your neighborhood. Well, Jimbo recently died 2 years ago, but the carport that he built still stands. I'd like to show you this picture here. I want you to take note of the carport, the distance it is from the neighbor's home, the front curbing in the foreground, the fence in the background, and then I want you to draw in your minds an imaginary line of where you think that property line would be. My hint would be down the middle. Quite similar to what I have over there at 1009 Montrose Drive. Upon viewing that picture, I think it's pretty easy to ascertain that neighbor had to request a variance, and Smyrna codes put a rubber stamp on it. I'm requesting a variance of 4.5 feet for my property. But, you know, I come in, I've done everything people have asked me to do, but I'm telling you, gentlemen, I still got a problem with it, because what I need you to understand is that it was never my intent to be indifferent, non-compliant, or belligerent to the law. 35 years working for UPS, compliance to the law is what I do. That's part of my job description. So I humbly ask for that variance of 4.5 feet, but moreover, I also ask for your assistance with that structure if there be anything wrong with it as it stands today. I mean, I'm standing here, I feel like a farmer with a mule in the ditch. I don't need 15 people telling me I got a mule in the ditch. I need to get the mule out of the ditch. I need help. You know, I put the carriage in front of the horse, and by no stretch of the imagination am I standing in front of you pleading stupidity as my defense. But I would hope that you would forgive me for my stupidity as well as my enthusiasm to make my home a better place for my family. Just trying to squeeze Jell-O, grab this thing called the pursuit of happiness, and it kind of backfired on me a little bit. So if I could get your help, I'd be greatly appreciated to that effect. I thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Which picture do you want to see? Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this time for Mr. West? Of course, we can always open it back up after some discussion. Taylor, I'll go ahead and do you have any questions for him, or?
Just to help in a future conversation, so on your carport that you have there,
Yes,
I'm seeing like I'll call it a gap for lack of better terms, between the house and what is that gap, roughly, distance-wise? Is that a 2-foot?
Distance-wise, I would say, yes, sir, I would say 2 feet. The overhang on the carport itself is a foot. It's a foot on each side. And I would want to hazard a guess that it might be a little less than a foot after the overhang, but I'm going to go ahead and call it a foot for a total of 2 feet. You know, I looked at that myself well before I got here. I looked at it last week because I've been agonizing over this thing, man. I'm not one to be non-compliant to the law. I mean, that's just not who I am.
And I'll say that's understood.
Yeah.
So,
but I was thinking if I could get an engineer in there, and maybe it's just an aesthetic thing. I mean, carports come in all different styles. You can have a slanted roof, A-frame roof with curved, you know, one wall, 2 walls, no walls. I mean, it's just a matter of your taste and what your money can afford. And that's all I was doing, getting what I could afford. I got that wall on the other side. I hope that's not an issue. The purpose for that, I'm putting my car in there, and, you know, my neighbor has a teenager, and teenagers have a tendency to weed eat, rocks fly, so on and so forth. But as far as that space between the edifice itself and the house, I would say it's about 2 feet. I was thinking if I could get an engineer in there to chop off that thing, but still, I mean, you're only talking 2 feet. I'm asking for 4.5. I would say, I would say that there's another 5 feet, from the edge of that concrete. And I've submitted pictures to Kevin, a better view of the side. Like behind that bush, you really can't tell. But behind that bush to the right there's about another 5 feet.
Towards the back.
From the house to the edge, of that drive is 14.16. So from the edge of the drive to the property line, my estimation would be that it's about 5 feet. But it would depend on where you put your tape measure, because I'm not saying that the drive is parallel to the property line. That's why I asked for 4.5 feet. Because if I told you it was 5 feet from the property line, that would be 9.5 feet that I would be from the property line, which would mean I'm asking for more than what I need. But I wanted to cover my bases in the event that someone came back at a later time and said, well, hey, this isn't correct, and I just want to avoid all that altogether. That's why I requested 4.5 feet, because you might measure from a different spot, and it could be 4 feet from the property line, at which point I would be 1/2 inch within the limitation. So what Mr. Mitchell said that I was requesting is actually shorter than what I actually wrote in my request. I requested 4.5 feet. But I'll take any suggestions to make that thing work. I just want to make it work. My friend, when he installed his, my neighbor, when he installed his, he was just trying to house a Johnny boat, I mean, I'm headed toward retirement. I wouldn't mind owning a pontoon, so I got that thing like I wanted it. I just, man, it's killing me to stand here right now. I mean, my blood is in a consternation like a volcano. I feel like I'm about to explode standing here right here in front of you today because I had no idea. I would have, man, I tell you what, let me say this. If I ever have another bright idea, you can pretty much rest assured that I'm going to have my butt down here to doggone Smyrna Codes and Planning, because this has been more mentally frustrating for me because officials of the town could have the wrong perception of who I am as an individual, irregardless of whether you approve, disapprove of what I'm asking for or not. So I just wanted to be above board with you. If you have any more questions, I'll be able to field them. More than happy to, ask any question you got.
Appreciate it.
I think at this time I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and we'll open up the Board of Zoning Appeals discussion. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you for your
Flores.
time.
All right, who wants to go first with questions? I've got a couple.
Can we give that to Mitch?
Yeah, I've got 2 questions to ask. And yeah, one of them will be showing us to Mitch. So obviously the new houses he's speaking of, is that a different, obviously his house is R3 and it's got an 8 feet off the side. It's just different?
It's a different set of setbacks that the houses adhere to. It's totally different circumstances.
Right, it's just simply different, but.
It's, different zoning. That's why we have it in the report that's for the R3 zone. Those may be under a PRD, planned residential development, so it's completely different rule set.
See, that was my question. The zoning, the type of residential you're zoned at changes that setback, even though the home could appear to be the same. It could be actually zoned differently. And the setbacks are different on this, so I also want to know. So is this a different?
Those are for the actual home itself. Detached structures in residential zones have the 8-foot side setbacks. So that's for the actual home itself. They have different setbacks.
So if
This is
that's
detached
clear,
structure.
it's that these homes are closer. That's not the issue. It's the accessory structure. That's the issue on that. That's what I'm hearing.
The setbacks say the actual principal structure can go that distance. It's
That makes that
Just
clearer
different.
for me and everybody. So as far as this particular thing goes, the difference is the house was approved based on the shorter distance between. This is a question of it, an accessory structure could not do that. All right, that's one question I have. Of another one. Obviously, this here, if we knew the address, can we see what, because on this, show this to Mitch, would you, Troy? He mentioned that this is also, is this in your same neighborhood, same street? Yeah, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing again, just so Mr. West can answer his questions here.
That's my neighbor diagonally across the street
In the same
at
cul-de-sac?
219 Sam Davis.
All right, so that's,
The only difference, you would have to check the plat to understand what I'm saying, but that lot is smaller than the lot that I reside on. However, I guess the hardship would be that I've got two frontage roads. I've got a frontage road and I've got a side frontage road. However, my house sits back further than my neighbor on the opposite side of the same cul-de-sac. I mean, I understand that part of it is how it's supposed to be, but it sits back like an additional 4 feet over and above what my neighbor across the street sits.
I guess one of the questions is, in that picture, it appears to be though closer to the, you know, I mean, what are you seeing?
That is an attached, what looks to be an attached structure.
That was my
and
question. Is
It's
that considered
possible,
attached?
it would have a higher setback regulation than a detached structure of 8 foot. So, and it's also possible it wasn't permitted, so we may not have seen it until this happened.
I don't know if it was a situation like that, or if there was a variance granted. There may have been a variance granted at some point in the past, but it could happen several years ago, and I've been here the entire time this development's been underway. And I do remember we have had variance requests in this neighborhood before, but not any recently, so I don't recall if this was a variance was granted or not. If it was built without a permit and not caught by
Yeah.
codes, you know.
There are things that get put up without us knowing about it, and
I think this is one of those
could
instances
be.
where that structure also was put up. Because see, I took the information from him. Just make sure it's detached from your home. Well, I made sure that it was detached from the home. So, but when I did it, I exaggerated it, and now I've got an additional 2 feet to the side. But Jimbo, like I say, he was rough around the edges, so, you know, he probably put it up before y'all knew about it, you know, and then after the fact.
Okay. Anybody have any further questions, Mr. West, at this time? All right, thank you, Mr. West.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll close the public hearing and reopen the Board of Zoning Appeals. I mean, I think it's fair for him to bring up that someone he's seeing may possibly have something similar, except that picture, it's attached, his is detached.
it looks to be.
I wonder if that carport could be attached, if it could have posts removed and somehow attached to the house, and would that change it? You know, what is the path of least resistance for him to be able to use carport? It's fair to ask after seeing that photo, do you believe the same?
I agree with
You
that.
can ask.
It's fair to ask.
In short, I mean, it would have to be moved to the back, rear of the house, in the rear lot somewhere. If you attach it, it's gonna have even higher
He's saying if
setback.
we attach it, then the setbacks get larger.
It's gonna be even a larger
It
setback
won't be, it'll
variance
be
request.
10 feet instead of 8 feet,
Correct.
because now it's part of the house, so it has to sit within that side setback of the house, not the side setback of an accessory structure. So it makes it more restricted if we attach it to the house.
I mean, granted, he moves it 2 feet closer to the house, that helps, but then he has an extra 2 feet setback, so he really doesn't get him ahead. 'Cause he has a 10-foot requirement instead of an 8-foot requirement.
And of course, if it's just moved closer to the house, it's still not meeting the.
It looks like it's,
variance.
just guessing, it looked like, what, a couple of feet if we say move it. You still have to have a variance. of it,
Right.
Either way.
It would just be 2.5 foot variance versus a 4.5 foot variance, or
Right.
am I backwards on my numbers?
So
you're right,
based
you're right.
on, I would say this, based on the numbers I have calculated, our parcel data is rough, it's not 100% accurate, but from what measurements I was getting at, I pulled that he is approximately 4.5 feet away from the setback line, which would request a 3.5 foot variance. So I just want that straightened out, just clarification.
So a 3.5 foot variance if he were to move it, if he could,
If he
were to
could move it
to-
3.5 foot closer to his house, there'd be no reason for a variance.
Yeah, there's no way that's.
Yeah, it's not that big.
Right. There's 2 foot. If you could cut the edge off, the lip off and move it, it'd still be 2 foot. So, I mean, we're still looking at a variance of some sort. I don't know that you can narrow it easily. Don't know if that makes it usable, if it's narrower. So, it's hard.
We're looking hard to try to find some hardship on this, and I'm gonna tell you what the problem is. It's hard to find a hardship because was there a permit? There was no permit pulled for it, correct?
Correct.
And so the permit would have said it has to be 8 feet off the side. So this is the conundrum is, it could have been built within code, and a permit was not pulled. And our job is to look for an actual hardship to say it would be okay to give a variance on something that's in our code, not just what we think. That's the problem. I know absolutely, 100% from hearing you that you put the carport up and there's just a carport. You were just following the driveway, the contour of it. Absolutely, 100% I know that. And it just ended up being where it ended up encroaching on a code we have. Because you can pour concrete where you want on there, but you can't put an accessory detached structure anywhere. That's the problem. So I'm looking for somewhere to find a hardship. Is everyone looking for that? And the problem is I'm not finding a hardship, which is really the only way we're allowed to grant it, is if there's something that prevented it from being placed in the correct place. And I sadly do not see anything unless anyone can correct me and show it to me.
I'm assuming that was probably bought, not built.
Yes, sir.
So what about the ability if you bought what if you couldn't buy a smaller one? What would have been the route there, Mitch? Well, maybe not Mitch, but if you can't buy anything smaller, you know what I mean? To me, that's a hardship. If I can't buy anything smaller, how can I ever have a carport right there?
But that's the issue.
Is you don't have a carport
You
there.
don't have one. Or you have to build one that
Or you
is,
extend your driveway and put it behind the house or something like that.
yeah, it has to be just in a different location. You sent some image.
Or talk to Public Works about possibly getting some kind of an entrance off Sam Davis, building a driveway off Sam Davis and to the carport in the back of the property, possibility.
So at this point, the only way we can see that we could allow this carport inside what our codes are is it would have to be moved. Moved to possibly the back of the property where there's actually room for it.
If it's going to stay the same size.
If it's going to stay the same size.
And was there a hindrance to that other than the manpower? Was there to move it towards the back? Is that something you just don't want to do, or something? I remember you starting your conversation by saying, "Don't tell me I gotta." Which, by the way, if you don't do communication for a living, you should. But you said something about not having a mule. Don't tell me I've got a mule in the ditch, but help me get one out.
Yeah.
So for the ability to move it towards the back, is the only thing stopping that would be being able to physically do it, or you don't want it back there? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
I tell you what, since you want to speak, I'm going to go ahead and close the BZA meeting and open up public hearing one more time.
I feel like I'm getting preferential treatment here. At the back, well, you saw at the back of that would change the whole entire contour of my backyard. It's not that I wouldn't want it back there, but then sitting on a perfect rectangle, if I moved it to the back, that would create a hardship, because then I'd need $1,200 to cut down a tree that's been standing there. I've only got 2 trees in my yard, and as a matter of fact, the tree you're looking at, well, not the spiral, but the branches off to the side here, that is actually, that tree goes all the way up. I guess I could, I'd have to come up with the money, but that tree would have to come down in order to make a drive knocking a curb out, coming off of Sam Davis, which would mean that the existing edifice that's back there, my shed, would need to be turned a different direction, which would really kind of mess up the flow and ambiance of the backyard, because at the back of the house, I've got a 448 square foot sunroom, which meets codes, by the way. So, as a matter of fact, you can see part of the sunroom right there on the edge of the house at the back. That goes all the way across the back of the house. So, I don't see that would work. I hate to shoot myself in the foot here, but it's either it stays up or it comes down. It seems like that's the direction we're headed here.
You good?
Because the only hardship that I have is the fact that my home sits an additional amount of footage back off the side frontage road, more so than my neighbor across the street.
I mean, one of the issues I can say is that this is the side setback on this side. You know, usually when we have cases that there are corner lots with two front setbacks, there's hardships created if it's reasonable that there's nowhere else to put something. And the problem is that this is on the side. This is not really it's not pertaining to the two front setbacks as a hardship. Is that correct?
I will say he does have two front setbacks, which pushes that house further back than a normal lot, as we stated in the report. So having the corner lot does push it back further into the corner than normally would, just as a reference.
Of course, that supports the case that we would be more likely to hear about moving it in one of those setbacks in the back where it's not encroaching on the side is the issue. So I guess we're talking, do you have anything else for Mr.
No, that
West?
was-
Anybody else can name Mr. West this time? Thank you, Mr. West. All right. So I'm going to close the public hearing and reopen the BZA meeting. I know we're giving us a lot of time because we care. And we try to find every way for everyone, including what you heard earlier tonight. We try to do everything we can to try to work with everybody, but we're limited on it has to meet this code, and at that point, we're just reading and interpreting it correctly, and we can't really use anything personal on there. But I know that everything that happened here was absolutely, because you did not know that, absolutely. Do we have any more discussion, or does anyone want to look at a motion for this? Anybody have, if it makes, here, the issue, and I'll go ahead and just say this, it's hard to approve it only based upon the fact that there's not a hardship that the carport could not be more narrow to fit inside the space. And I hate that that's the case, that you have that. I'm trying to see how we could do that, and it would be fair on all counts and into the future when we have the same requests being asked, and if it happened again, how we could do that. You know, when it could have been prevented. And this is what it makes being on this board miserable, is when you don't want to put anyone in a position to have to move something, but we can't find a hardship to leave it. That would be fair for the future and for growth. Anybody else have anything to say, or?
Again, like a previous applicant, I mean, sympathetic to the situation, but in the same sense that in our last application, there's nothing, no hardship there that we can find to justify it. We've tried.
I mean, I'm looking for one, but I don't see anything that we can do. I do want to request, he did take the picture of that one carport on that one lot. Maybe that's something we should look at.
Yeah, I wrote the address down and everything. We'll take a look at that for sure.
Well, is there a motion from anybody?
I mean, based on what we've discussed, I think we have to deny just based on the lack of hardship that's set forth with the property line and the,
All right, so we have a
as
motion.
sympathetic as I am. That's
Yeah,
where I
I
have to go.
understand, this is hard. So we have a motion for denial of the request based on no hardship present pertaining to the request. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. West is with a heavy heart that we have to deny that, and it is because there's nothing we have that shows that it is a particular hardship that's covered inside of our codes that we currently have. it doesn't meet where it cannot be rectified. Now, I do want to point out something Troy was mentioning, I think you guys are alluding to it. If there's some way that this can be repositioned and or moved that works, because it looks like obviously that structure is that size, and it doesn't look like, unless it can be changed, can it be narrowed in any way?
I don't believe that it could be. I mean, unless I could sell it what I bought it for and buy a different one, but that would reduce the size of my pond.
I mean, maybe whoever you bought it from can do like a credit to a slightly narrower one, and you can get it closer to the house. I mean, it looks like it's wide enough for your car. I don't know.
You know,
Just a thought.
I mean, I made the measurements myself. Like I said, right there is a good picture of it. I mean, that's 5 feet. So, I mean, to me, if I narrowed it, it wouldn't be usable. I mean, like I stated, like I told you, I didn't want to shoot myself in my own foot, but it's either you approve it or it has to come down. I mean, it's no ambiguity in it.
We're sorry, we wish we could approve it. I'm sorry we couldn't.
I thank you for your time, John.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure y'all don't want those pictures, do you? Thank you, Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. West.
I appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
If I need y'all, I'll be sure to be. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. West. All right, we have next business, and Mitch is going to tell us about it. Looks like we have a request for a special exemption to allow a detached accessory apartment.
That's correct. This is a request for 207 Windlewood Circle to allow a detached accessory apartment at their property. Property is zoned R2, low-density residential, approximately 0.26 acres in size. The accessory apartment is already built and currently being used as an accessory apartment. The existing unit is roughly 384 square feet in size. Applicant is using the accessory apartment for family members with health issues. Building was originally permitted as a garage but is being used as an accessory apartment and does not have a certificate of occupancy at this time. Section 7.060B of the zoning ordinance details requirements for authorizing special exceptions, and they are detailed as follows. A conditional use permit special exception shall be provided the board finds that it A, is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated so that the public health, safety, and welfare will be protected. Staff finds the use of a detached accessory apartment at this site should not negatively affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Will not adversely affect other property in the area. Staff believes this should not be any problem for this instance. Is within the provision of special exceptions as set forth in the ordinance. Section 5.051.2C details accessory apartments as a special exception within the R2 district. Conforms to all applicable provisions of this ordinance for the district in which it is located. Staff finds the site may be able to conform to all applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance as listed in criteria review section 7.060C. Prior to the issuance of a special exception, the board shall make written findings certifying compliance with the specific rules governing individual special exceptions, and that satisfactory provisions and arrangements have been made concerning all the following where applicable. Ingress and egress to the property with the proposed structure. Access to the site will utilize the existing driveway off of Windlewood Circle. Off-street parking. Staff finds the lot may provide sufficient space for parking in the existing driveway, pending on number of people residing in the accessory apartment as well as the existing dwelling unit. Refuse and service areas. Refuse collection will proceed in the same manner as currently. Utilities with reference to location availability and compatibility. This location has all the necessary utilities that will be used to support this detached accessory apartment. Signs, if any. Staff finds the accessory apartment use should fit the compatibility with properties in the same district with reference to the above effects to glare, traffic, safety, economic effect, and compatibility. required yard and open space. Staff finds the yard has necessary yard and open space to allow for a detached accessory apartment as it is already present at this site. General compatibility with adjacent properties and other property in the district. Staff finds the use may not be compatible with adjacent properties due to other lots in the area not having a detached accessory apartment. Staff recommends putting a conditional approval on this request that the applicant pays all the applicable fees associated with an accessory apartment from Rutherford County Development Tax, Town of Smyrna impact fees, code inspection fees, and others if necessary, and obtains a certificate of occupancy from the codes department. This must all be completed before the building has any occupants residing inside of it. As far as the fees are concerned, the Rutherford County Development Tax fee is $1,500. Town of Smyrna impact fees, $1,824. As an electrical permit, as far as I am aware, still needs final on this building, which is a $125 fee. And then any other fees, I'm not sure what those could be yet, but those for sure will need to be paid. And then a certificate of occupancy will need to be granted as well for this before it may be resided in. Two pictures. This is just from the road at the intersection, and then that is a closer up view of the accessory apartment at this site. That's it.
Before we open up a public hearing, a couple things for Mitch wanted to ask is, obviously, there's no setback issues or nothing like that. This is just simply an exemption to allow this accessory apartment.
Correct.
So we're just talking about what the use of it and all that.
Correct. It was originally permitted as a garage. It went through the inspection process. They went out there, checked location of it, said, yeah, location's
And I
good to
see that
go.
we're recommending just to get it, everything approved to get it to the certificate. I mean, that's gonna add value real estate-wise to the property also, because at this point, it's just a garage as it's listed.
As it's listed, the use is different, so we need to get this use fixed. And then I will say, we all have also had a couple of phone calls regarding this and people concerned with the possible of it being rented out in the future. Staff would make a recommendation that you put a condition on this as well, that it is not being used for rental purposes at all.
Sorry, everyone, I've got to write things down. I will never remember if I don't.
That is fine.
Does anyone have any, before we close our meeting and open up public hearing, any questions? Okay, so we will close the BZA meeting and open up a public hearing for those for or against the request. You step up to the mic and state your name and address.
My name is Billy Walden. I own the property. I do not reside at it. The house is for, everybody that's in the house is disabled. My mother lives in the main house. She is disabled. My brother has limited income. He can work. He's disabled. My niece is working on her disabilities. I mean, everybody in the house, except for the children, are disabled, which is why we built that for my aunt. There was just not enough space. Everybody there has health care coming in and out, and DHS stuff is constantly there monitoring. Aunt has a coloscopy bag, urine bag. He has a half of a foot. They have limited mobility, so they just have to have their own space. Originally, I hired a contractor, Wolf Home Improvement, to build the structure. He knew what it was for. At the time, I'm a truck driver. If I knew how to pull the permits and do all this, I'd have done it myself, but this is why I hired a contractor. He knew what it was for. He knew it was for a house. As they were permitting the place for different things, for the foundation, for the framing, for the plumbing and everything, they could see that it had a bathroom. It's bathroom structure. It's separate bathrooms, kitchen. The main room, when you walk in there, you know it's not a garage. You can see it's an apartment. It's nice, as you can see it. I'd live in it if they didn't. I have no intentions of ever renting it out. Like I said, it's just for disabled family, and if time comes, they pass before me, I'll probably move back into the house. But it was never an intention to be a garage. The contractor knew it was a garage. The inspectors that were coming out and inspecting it knew what it was, knew what we were using it for, until later on, 6 months after living in it, it didn't become an issue. I don't know why then it did, but that's why we're here. But my intention was not, like everybody else that comes up here before y'all, was never to deceive anybody or take shortcuts or anything like that. I'm just trying to take care of my family, Everybody lives in the house. They're not able to live on their own collectively. The money's enough they pull together, and, there's no rent charge for anybody in the house. The house is paid for. They just pay utilities. The utilities are my name. Everybody gets paid on the 1st because they're all on disability. I pay it on the 31st. I go over and say, well, this is what y'all's utilities are, and they just pay the utilities. So it's, like I said, everybody by themselves cannot take care of themselves, but collectively, everybody manages. We get by as a family. So, but like I said, it was never permitted to be a garage. It was obviously permitted. The guy deceived me. He didn't even finish the job. He got about halfway done, and I'm having to sell vehicles, take out HELOCs loans on my house, and sell vehicles and everything else just to financially pay to get it finished. So he just walked off on me. So I'm not surprised that he deceived me by telling me that he's got everything done, and I had no reason to question it, because as time goes along, all these inspectors are passing this, passing that, and so I assume they know. I had no reason to not believe that he wasn't being honest until he skipped out on me. But so that's where I'm at with that. It's I'll do whatever I got to do. I don't have a choice. There's no going backwards. You see how upset this man was about a carport. I got a disabled family that has nowhere to go, and they couldn't afford to live on their own even if this doesn't go through. So there's no going back. I'll do whatever I got to do. I'll make whatever modifications, jump through whatever hoops I got to do, but there's no going back. There's no other options for us.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Walden at this time? Nobody?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walden. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak for or against? Okay, this time we'll close the public hearing and open up the Board of Zoning Appeals. I have a couple of things here I want to ask. Mitch, what you just brought up, which I think is important, especially when we've had people ask about it. If we put a conditional approval on this and we mention that cannot be used for rental purpose, how would that work I'm just saying if, we're putting that here for approving this structure use. I don't know how that's going to actually convey. We're worried about the house selling, because obviously your use for it is completely clear, absolutely. But if you sold the home, what would happen with
So
the buyer?
if you were to approve this, your approval sticks with the property, not the owners, so it's for future owners.
Which is what I thought. That's
Correct.
we need that real clear, so we make sure, because the 2 phone calls you have were specific to that issue, correct? So by putting this on the approval, we have satisfied their concern. Okay? Well, that's very
And that's
important.
the one question I was going to ask, so.
Yeah.
So for someone who's going to come in, and just assuming he's selling the property down the road, someone who comes in to buy, how are they informed of that? There's really no way to know.
No, we can't send out a letter every time the property gets sold.
Right.
It would be if someone, I suppose, we're speculating, so there's no reason for that at this point. However, we do have it, logged down that we have put this condition on it. It could be referenced again.
So
I don't think
someone-
it's putting any kind of thing on the deed or anything where, like conditional use or anything, but.
He would have a duty to disclose that to the buyer.
The
He
seller
would, and then because if we enforce it against them, they would say whether they knew about it or not, so they would come back to him if they didn't know
Right.
about it.
His realtor would have to know that to be able to disclose that to whoever bought the house.
Right.
Okay. Those are a couple questions I had that I thought were important. My initial thoughts personally from reading through, obviously we have to have an electrical inspection done, you said, so. As far as the conditional approval, I know I heard you say staff recommends a conditional approval just based on, of course, it getting everything done to actually get the certificate of occupancy, which does add to the value of the home. At that point, everything is actually paid up and it's part of that, so. I don't know how much discussion we need here. Staff did a wonderful job, again, of doing all of this great work. And I like their recommendation of the conditional approval, just as written here. But obviously, with the addition of it cannot be used for a rental purchase. Does anybody have any other discussion points that they want to talk about? No?
No, I'm good with.
Tell you what, I am going to make the motion then. I'm going to move to approve the special exemption to allow a detached accessory apartment. This is a conditional approval. The applicant must pay all applicable fees associated with accessory apartment, which includes Rutherford County Development Tax, Town of Smyrna impact fees, codes inspection fees, etc. And I suppose at that point, do we help him, by the way, with know what those are?
Yeah,
Some
we can let him
assistance
know.
in the.
If he comes by the coast department, You could find out.
Okay, she'll know what those are. And obtains a certificate of occupancy from the codes department. This must all be completed before the building has any occupants residing inside. And an additional, now, does this need to be separate, Jeff? Can this all be in the same?
I'll be in the same motion.
All in the same motion. Also, a conditional approval that the accessory apartment cannot be rented. It must be used by the property owner. Is that the best way to put that? Leaving anything out, making sure everybody's covered, we're good? So there's your motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. So you have the two conditions on it. One is obviously these guys will walk you through what you need to have inspected and all the different fees and things and such. And good, okay.
You can do tomorrow.
You got a number something? Or extension?
Thank you, Mr. Walden. Sorry about your trouble you've had getting that built. So anything we can do to help from this point forward.
I sure appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. All right, do we have any comments from staff?
I'm good.
No comments. We have talked you out tonight. Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.